It was sometime in 2017 when I had to deliver from Louisiana to New Mexico a long, grueling drive that usually took me 3 or 4 days, depending on stops and weather. I packed everything I needed: extra water, food. I'd done this route before, but never thought much about the long stretches of empty desert along the way. On the last night of my trip, not too far from the New Mexico border, my luck ran out. My truck sputtered and died right there in the middle of nowhere. No lights, no houses, just an endless stretch of desert highway. I tried starting it again and again, but it wouldn't budge. I pulled out my phone to call dispatch for help. No signal. I climbed up on the cab hoping for a single bar, but nothing. Hours went by as I sat in the cab, trying not to panic. A few cars drove by, but none stopped. Maybe they didn't see me, or maybe they didn't want to. As the sun dipped behind the flat horizon and the darkness spread, the silence pressed in hard. I'd never felt so alone. Every sound, the desert wind whistling through the brush, made my skin crawl. Then, just when I'd started to think I'd have to sleep in the cab till daylight, I saw headlights in the distance. A truck, an older rig by the looks of it. I ran into the road, waving my arms like a madman. The driver slowed down and pulled over a few yards ahead of my dead rig. I jogged up to the cab. The driver rolled down the window, and that's when I saw him, an old Mexican trucker with greasy hair, a cigar clamped between yellowed teeth. His eyes were small, dark, and fixed on me like he could see straight through me. I hesitated for half a second. Something about him made my stomach twist, but I didn't have a choice. I told him what had happened, where I was headed, how long I'd been stranded. He didn't say much, just listened, puffed on that cigar, and finally grunted, "Yeah. I'll take you to the next town." I locked up my rig and climbed into the cab beside him. The inside reeked of stale smoke and something sour. Sweat, maybe. He didn't say a word as he pulled back onto the highway. I could barely breathe with all that cigar smoke swirling around, so I asked, "Mind if I roll the window down?" He turned to me, and for a second I thought he'd snap, but then he just nodded once. I cracked the window and gulped in the cold night air. We drove for maybe 15-20 minutes in silence, just the low rumble of the old truck and the wind whipping through the cracked window. Suddenly, without warning, he slammed on the brakes. The truck lurched to a stop on the side of the empty road. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He didn't answer, just sat there, eyes locked on the dark highway ahead. Then, out of nowhere, he turned and started yelling at me, screaming at me to get out. I tried to ask what was wrong, but his shouting only got louder. Heart pounding, I grabbed the door handle, stumbled out and stepped away from the truck, my boots crunching in the loose gravel. He waited a second, then gunned the truck forward a few yards and stopped again. I watched frozen as he leaned out the window. That's when I saw the flash, heard the deafening crack of gunshots. He was firing at me in the pitch black of the desert night. I dropped to the ground, rolling into the dirt and trying to make myself as small as I could. The shots kept coming, but I couldn't see him and he couldn't see me. Then just as suddenly he floored it and disappeared into the darkness, the red taillights bouncing away down the highway. I lay there for what felt like hours, afraid he'd come back. When I finally got up, I realized how alone I really was, no clue where I even was anymore. So I did the only thing I could do: I started walking. I walked for what felt like forever under that wide, empty sky until I saw headlights again, a small car coming fast. I stumbled into the middle of the road, waving my arms. The car slowed, stopped, and a man got out. He looked as shocked as I was. He asked what happened, why I was out here, what I was doing. I told him everything, trying to hold it together. He didn't ask many questions, just opened the door and told me to get in. He drove me to the nearest town, where I finally called my company and told them everything. The cops came, took my statement, but there wasn't much they could do. I hadn't caught the truck's plates. They said they'd keep an eye out for a suspicious old trucker matching my description, but nothing ever came of it. I never heard from them again, but to this day, when I drive on those empty roads at night, I always wonder what might have happened if he hadn't missed in the dark. It was back in 2019, when I was working for a trucking company that mostly ran routes across the southern states. I'd made plenty of long hauls before, but one trip still haunts me to this day. This run was from Colorado to Texas, nothing unusual, except for the urgency. Normally, I drove mostly during the day, but this time I had to make the delivery on a tight deadline, so I ended up driving through the night. I packed up my essentials, checked the rig twice and hit the road as dusk settled in behind the mountains. Hours passed in silence, just the steady hum of the engine and the empty highway stretching out in front of me. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere, probably around the state line, my headlights caught something odd up ahead. A car was pulled off the shoulder, headlights still on, but it looked wrong. As I got closer, I slowed down and realized the front end was smashed up badly. It must have hit something. I pulled over a few yards ahead, turned on my hazards, and stepped out into the cold night air. My boots crunched on the gravel as I approached the car. It had veered off the road and slammed into a tree. Inside, I could see a man sitting motionless in the driver's seat, staring blankly through the cracked windshield. I tapped on the window once. No reaction. I knocked again, harder this time. Slowly, he lowered the window just a few inches. "You okay, man?" I asked. Silence. His eyes stayed fixed on something I couldn't see. I asked again, louder, and finally he turned his head. His voice was flat when he spoke. Yeah, I'm fine. You need help? Should I call someone?" He didn't answer right away. Then, almost like he was remembering his lines, he said, "Can you drop me at the nearest gas station?" Something about the way he spoke made my skin crawl, but it was late, and leaving him stranded didn't feel right. I told him to grab what he needed and come with me. He got out slowly, barely looking at me, and climbed up into the passenger seat of my truck. The gas station was about 60 miles down the highway. I tried making small talk, but he didn't say much. The whole ride he kept twisting around in his seat, glancing behind us, then at the road ahead, like he was watching for someone or something. By the time we finally pulled into the gas station, my nerves were shot. I shifted into park, ready to let him out, but before I could say a word, he pulled out a gun. "Give me everything," he said, voice low but steady. "Wallet, phone. Get out." My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I could barely breathe. I nodded, hands up, and reached for my wallet. He motioned for me to stay put while he climbed down. The second his boots hit the ground, I snapped back to life. I slammed the truck in reverse, floored it and tore out of the lot. I heard a gunshot crack through the night. I don't know if he was trying to hit me or scare me, but I didn't stick around to find out. I drove for miles, hands shaking on the wheel, until I reached the drop-off point. There I finally found a phone and called the police. I told them about the car, the man, the gas station, everything. They said they'd look for him. A few days later, the cops called me back. They'd found the car exactly where I'd first seen it, totaled and abandoned. They ran the plates. It turned out the car was stolen. There were no weapons inside, no blood, nothing. I'd figured he must have been hurt in the crash, but there wasn't a single drop of blood anywhere. They searched the woods around the crash site, checked every gas station for miles, but they never found him. I think I was lucky to get out from there without any harm. I was moving out of New York to Florida. I'd gotten into a college down there, and I was ready to leave everything behind for it. My parents weren't too happy about how I planned to get there. They told me to fly, said it'd be faster and safer than driving a battered old mini truck halfway down the East Coast. But I had too much stuff to haul, a lot of boxes, all of it squeezed into the back of my dad's old truck. He used to use it for pickups and deliveries when I was a kid. He offered to come with me, too, said the drive was too long for me to handle alone. I promised him I'd be fine. I'd done plenty of driving around the city, but never something like this. He checked the truck one last time, loaded my boxes in tight, gave me a hug, and told me to call if I needed anything. The first few hours were fine open roads, the hum of tires on asphalt, the thrill of freedom buzzing in my chest. But after 7 straight hours, the excitement burned off. My back was stiff, my eyelids kept dropping, and the highway started to blur into one endless, dark ribbon. I knew I had to stop before I drifted off behind the wheel. I found a cheap motel just off the empty road, and steered the truck down the quiet exit. It didn't look creepy, just old and plain, the neon sign flickering but still alive. I parked near the door and dragged my aching body inside. The front desk was empty. I stood there, half asleep, calling out, "Hello? Anyone here?" It took a few minutes, but eventually a man shuffled out from the shadows behind the desk. He barely said a word, just nodded when I asked for a room, slid me an ancient key, and disappeared again. The room was rough. Rusty pipes, torn carpet, stains on the walls I didn't want to think about. The blankets looked older than me, so I ripped them off the bed and lay down without them. I was too tired to care. I closed my eyes and knocked out almost instantly. I don't know how long I slept before I heard a soft tapping at the door. At first, I thought I'd imagined it. But then came a voice, muffled but clear, "Room service." Room service? At that hour? And in a place like this? It made no sense. I stayed quiet, hoping they'd go away. The tapping turned to pounding, fist after fist on the thin wood. My heart raced. I crept to the door and peeked through the peephole. There wasn't just one person out there, there were 3, maybe 4. Just standing there. No uniforms, nothing, just standing too close together, shadows shifting in the hallway light. I felt my chest tighten. Something told me not to open that door. I backed away, glancing around the room. There had to be another way out. The bathroom window, it was tiny, but maybe big enough. I climbed onto the counter, shoved it open, squeezed through, scraping my elbows on the frame. I hit the ground behind the motel and ran, no time to look back. I jumped into my dad's truck, started it up and tore out of that lot like the devil was on my tail. When I was far enough away, I pulled over and called the cops, breathless and shaking. When I told them what happened, the dispatcher said they will send a patrol car. I hung up, my hands trembling on the wheel. I looked in the rearview mirror at the empty road behind me. But later what I found still haunt me. They told me, "That motel's been abandoned for months. The owner moved away, there's no staff there anymore. They searched the area but found nothing." I promised myself I'd never drive that stretch alone again. I used to work for a trucking company, long hauls, endless miles, the road stretching ahead like it would never end. I won't mention where I was that night, or which route I was on. Some things are better left vague. One thing about me, I'm addicted to caffeine. Coffee, energy drinks, I can't drive without them. I always pack enough for every trip, but that night, I'd underestimated the miles. By the time midnight rolled in, my stash was gone. My eyelids felt like lead, and the road started to twist and ripple in front of me. I knew I was hallucinating from the exhaustion. I checked the map for anything nearby, a diner, a gas station, anything. The only place that popped up was a small liquor store about 5 kilometers off the highway, down a narrow side road. I didn't care about the detour, I just needed a shot of sugar and caffeine to keep my eyes open and my truck on the asphalt. I found the turnoff, a cracked, lonely road that wound through thick trees before opening up to a small gravel lot. The store sat there, half buried in shadows. The front door stood half open, drifting in the warm breeze. My brain was screaming for a drink, so I parked and stepped out. The place was dead silent. No cars, no hum of coolers, just darkness. I pushed it wider and stepped inside. The store was pitch black except for a flickering light coming from the back, maybe an office or a storage room. The shelves were mostly bare, the whole place smelled stale, like spilled beer and old wood. I found the vending machine, but when I pushed the buttons, it rattled empty. Frustrated and desperate, I moved toward the back, following the only light in that dead building. That's when I heard a dull thud, heavy, like something hitting the floor. I froze. Squinting, I could just make out 2 men in the back room, half-shadowed. They were bent over something, a huge canvas bag, dark and lumpy on the concrete. One of them rummaged through it, while the other just stood there and was holding the torch. I couldn't see what was inside, but every alarm bell in my head went off at once. I started to back away, eyes still locked on them, hoping they wouldn't notice me. But then my boot clipped an empty soda can and the noise bounced off the walls like a gunshot. Both men froze. Slowly, their heads turned toward me. One of them rasped, "Who's there?" I didn't wait to find out what they'd do if they caught me. I turned and ran, heart hammering so loud I couldn't hear my own footsteps. I burst through the door, sprinted across the lot, and practically leapt into my truck. I jammed the keys in the ignition and started the car. In the mirror, I saw them standing outside the store now, half hidden in the shadows, just watching me. They didn't chase me. I never went back, never called the cops. Sometimes, when I'm on the road late at night, I wonder what was in that bag and what they were doing.